you'll see that we've got the group based in AccessUserGroups.org/PowerApps, and we've got a videos section under here where you can see previous videos. That's where this one will be posted as well. So if anybody wants to see any of those videos in the future, that's a great place to get those. And so generally, Power Apps is a technology that Microsoft has come out with that allows you to quickly build apps on your iPhone, iPad, Android devices that connect to the most common connections, data connections that people use. Everything from not only Microsoft technologies like SQL and Azure and SharePoint lists and Excel, but also things like Google Sheets, Salesforce, MailChimp, Google Analytics, Facebook, and hundreds of other connections to get that data. Power Apps runs natively on your iPhone and Android, and so both of them, all you have to do is install the Power Apps app. And the way I just kind of describe it is that you only have to install that app one time on your phone, and kind of like when you're using Excel, Excel doesn't matter whether you're running a budget or you're running financials, you're running a grocery list. Excel doesn't care what kind of spreadsheet you're running inside of Excel. Power Apps is the same thing. You install the app itself, and then whatever app you've created for your company, you can run those apps inside of it. So Power Apps doesn't care what app you're running inside of it. And so in this group meets once a month. So I appreciate people joining. And so today we're going to be talking about tips for using different controls. And I'm just going to kind of jump into it. I've also put my email in here, andy@worksmartdb.com, if people want to reach out to me at a later time. And so I want to go through a few of the things that I've found within Power Apps that have really helped me along, and things that in a lot of these I've had links because I found them using the community forums and things like that. And so one of the things that I like, and this is even before using the controls, is that there's a thumbnail view within Power Apps. So typically you have a list of the browser screens, and in fact I'll just show people quickly. I'm going to throw Power Apps over here. And so what we have is this tree view, which has the different pages and rectangles and stuff like that. But what I find is that if you shift over to the thumbnail view, that it will it gives you a quick image of of the app that you're working with, and so it's easier to select those for me. What's interesting though is when you first load it, some of these take a while to load in this thumbnail view. So if you want to view something, I typically just like click on them, and that way it'll load those. And I don't want it to use my camera right now. So that's one. Using that thumbnail view for me is something I really like. All right, so the second thing is that a lot of people are used to using the properties on the right-hand side of the screen. And the issue that I have with that is that the scroll bar that's on the right-hand side of this property bar is very, very thin, and so it's difficult to scroll up and down. And so what I found is that if I click on a control, in this case I'm on the slider, I was on the slider control, is that you can use the properties within the formula bar to choose things in alphabetical order. And so it's easier to select a border color, border style this way instead of having to find it in a smaller type on that right hand side. And so that's a real quick way of getting to some of those properties that you wouldn't normally get to. Um, the next thing has to do with when people, like when I typically design in Microsoft Access. I've been using and programming in Access since 1994, so I'm kind of dating myself. But within Access, when you design those databases for people, they're used to having a keyboard in front of them, and they're either using their laptop or their, in my case, I've got three screens here, and it's conducive to using a mouse and keyboard. But what one of the mistakes that I see people make most often is that they design apps within Power Apps like they were using a database. And so what um, and so one of the issues that is that when you're using like an iPhone or a Samsung phone, whenever you look at that keyboard isn't readily available, and even when it is, my last phone was iPhone 6S, and so the keyboard was so small that I kept fat fingering everything that I was typing in. And so what I suggest to people is use the controls within Power Apps that make it easier for people to select things. Look, in this case, we've got the standard control, and this is actually a control that comes with, or an app that comes with. It's like, I think it's the cost estimator or something like that. That's one of the Power Apps templates, and they even have it where you're typing in a number in the length field. Well, you can a better way of doing that. You can still have the length there for people to type in, but using a slider control, you can have it slide to like 15 feet. And by default, it goes from like 0 to 100, but you can set the default, or you can set the range of the slider control to be what you want. So if you want it to be 0 to 20 feet, or 1 to 24 feet, or 1 to 50 feet, whatever it is, you can make that slider control fit only those numbers that you want. And it's a lot easier for people to put their finger on on that slider control um, instead of having to type in numbers. Um, all right, so Sandy made a comment that she prefers the tree view, and she prefers the properties in the right pane, which is great. So different people like different things, and that's why Microsoft designed it that way. Being able to do both, both ways. So that's awesome. Um, let's go to the next slide here. Another one is showing Power BI tiles within your application. And so if you go to controls and you go all the way to the bottom of the controls, there's a Power BI tile. And a lot of people with Power BI tile, I'm not sure if you realize that, or people realize it, but Power Apps, Power BI, and Microsoft Flow are all part of the same team within Microsoft. And that team is actually bigger than the SharePoint team. So that tells you the kind of resources that Microsoft is putting into Power Apps and Power BI and Microsoft Flow. And so the integration with Power BI is great, and the ease of use of being able to immediately select a Power BI tile within your app is great. And you're really giving people the capability of seeing all those different desktop tiles, like dashboard tiles that you've created through using Power BI. So that's another great feature of that. The other thing, while I'm on that subject, is that as Microsoft is really concentrating on Power BI first. So when they release connections, generally those new connections are for Power BI. But the great thing is that once they build it for Power BI, it makes it easier for them to add those connections into Power Apps. So if you're like, gosh, when are they going to release the Salesforce connection, and things like that. So you can kind of look, oh, is it in Power BI? Yeah, chances are it'll be coming to Power Apps pretty soon. Um, Here's another one is that, and I mentioned using controls over text before, but you can really get creative with some of these. And I'm gonna copy this link into the chat window that so you people have it. But basically, what you can this is something that was created by one of the people on the Power Apps team, and it was really a unique way of using controls that you normally wouldn't think about. And to select the temperature here, you've got the slider control, but in this case, they're selecting humidity. And what they did is they actually put a dark circle and a white circle together. So they have a white circle on top of a black circle. But as you move your finger around the circle, it'll automatically select 0 to 100%. And so don't feel like you're just stuck with only the slider control for selecting these things. You definitely want to choose use buttons and utilize controls the way people would use their phone. And so you want to kind of think outside the box of just typing in numbers and letters all the time, and actually being able to use things like this. Another example that I've seen, I don't have it in here, but Microsoft had an application. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick. Let me see if I can find it real quick. There's there's an app that Microsoft has and it's called like Kudos or something like that. And yeah, here, I think I found it. Nope, I guess not. But basically, what it was is that it was an application for a manager to quickly send, kudos or a thank you or congratulations or things like that from their Power App. And so what they did is there were 6 of the most common kudos, whether it's congratulations on a sale, or a great job with this customer, or whatever it is that they're sending congratulations out for. But it's really quick and easy for them. Instead of hitting a drop-down menu and having to choose one of 6 items on a drop-down menu, they have like 6 or 8 different pictures. And when you select that picture, that's the kudo that gets sent out to that user, to their employee or whatever. And so, again, instead of using drop-down menus all the time and entering things with text box and list box and things like that we're used to in like the Microsoft Access world, take the time to figure out, okay, how are people actually going to be utilizing this Power App, and how can I make it easier for people to enter information? Also in that Kudos app was kind of cool because they allowed the user to record a voice message. So instead of just great job, you're actually personalizing it by you're recording a quick audio message and saying, hey John, great job today. I appreciate all your hard work and all that kind of stuff. And it just makes it much more personable for them. Okay, so the next tip is having 2 controls which work together. And so you may have an application where you may want to have it display certain information sometimes and not have it display other times. And in this example that they have, and again, I'm going to copy and paste, copy and paste this link into the chat window so people have it there. But this example is they wanted to have it so that they can either show the date or not show the date. A good use of this functionality would be, let's say that you're creating an application for a customer, or a group of people, or your internal customers, and sometimes you want to show it to other people, but you don't want those people that you're demoing to see the data, the live data from your customer. So what this gives you the ability to do is hide the data that is kind of the live data that should not be shared. It's all confidential and private, so you don't want to be able, you don't want to share that real data. So this would be the kind of give you the ability of showing or not showing certain text, and that one checkbox can handle multiple portions. And actually, I want to show you there's a relatively new feature in Power Apps. I'm going to move Power Apps over again, and in here you'll see that there's a relatively new feature called Rules. And what Rules allows you to do is say, hey, if this control has a number greater than 10, or whatever that rule is, then you can make something happen with another control. And so that's kind of like what I have before. So if you check off one, you can have it handle all the things, and it's quicker to do this new rule. And you can see here it says Rules Experimental. So it's easier to do it this way instead of having to design something with a formula. I'll move that back over again. So Sandy is saying about the two controls, or similarly based on a value in one control, display other data fields or not. Yeah, correct. You can do it that way, or in some cases you're saying if the person put yes in this field, then you don't need to show these two fields because they're not relevant to that particular answer. So let me know if that answers your question. Yep, that's basically it. The one thing though is you can't do what's called you can't do a circular reference where you're having a rule based on the same control. So it's not like the auto format that you can do that way. So just keep that in mind, that rules have to control other controls, not its own control. But you can use formulas to do that. All right, so the next one, and I'm going to copy this one, is, and this is a bit beyond the control side of things, but more and more people are wanting to not only use that Power Apps app on their phone, but if they're in the office and they've got a larger screen and they're already in SharePoint, you can embed those Power Apps directly into the SharePoint page. And you can see here is you've got the menu system on the side, and you get the title bar here, but that the Service Desk app is taking up quite a bit of that screen. And obviously when you're designing this kind of app, you would want to do it in the tablet mode, not in the phone mode. You could do a phone in here, but it's kind of looks kind of odd. It's just really small when you could take advantage of the bigger screen. And so this gives you the ability to allow people to access those apps straight from SharePoint instead that way when they're on their computer, they can be using the app there. When they're on their phone or away from their desk, they can be doing it on their phone or tablet. And again, as we're going through this, just like Sandy is, please put in any questions that you have into the conversation or chat window, and I'll respond to those as we go. All right, the next one is displaying a map. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this one and paste that in there. So, whoops, people have the link for that. It's going very slow. And so here's the link for that one. And in this example, it's showing you can do both Google Maps, but you can do Bing Maps or Google Maps, either one. Bing Maps allows you to have a little bit larger map than Google Maps. Google Maps, if you use the free one, it's more of a square. I think it's like 64 by 64. But having a map that you can immediately show people instead of having, a link to the map on their, iPhone or Samsung or Android or whatever it is, they're being able to utilize some of those technologies that are already in the app to better utilize that. So displaying a map is a really good use of that. And of course, well, yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. The next thing is considering your audience. And I say design for everyone, even including those that are colorblind or other visual impairments. And this is one of those things that I never really did a lot to start with. But then Ben Clothier, who he's also an MVP. When you work with, just keep in mind that there's different people that have different impairments, whether it's colorblind or deaf or or whatever it is, and you want to make sure that you design for those kind of people, because sometimes you'll see I've seen apps that have light green on a light blue background, and it's very difficult for people to distinguish between the different colors or those shading, and so just keep those kind of things in mind and try and design for those kind of people. There's a TV show, I'm gonna sidetrack for a second, but there's a TV show that I watch, and I think it's called Right Now. And what it is it talks about different videos that are on YouTube and different things like that. And this, I was watching it. It was either earlier this week or last week, and they've actually got some newer technology that are these goggles that they're they're smaller than like the Gear VR goggles, but what they do is they actually help people with that are legally blind or colorblind to actually see the differences in those colors and see some of those things. And the device that they showed, this one father was legally blind, and with these $10,000 goggles, they were actually able to see their child's face for the first time, and see their expression. And it was just really incredible what some of the technology that they're working on can do. But again, just keep those kind of things in mind. There's an area in. Grab this as well. Copy this and put this also in the chat window. is that there's an area called the Community Apps Gallery that are within the Power Apps community. And I encourage people to go in and look at those because there's some really unique things that people are doing. And uh, even if you're designing an app for case management, there are things that you can use from a Bible reader app or some other kind of app that you can utilize in your app. So uh, when you go into those, I recommend that you browse, a bunch of those as much as you can. Don't be limited to just business apps or just the kind of app that you're working on, because I think people will be able to get ideas of from many different types of apps, because there's a lot of really cool things there. Um, there's also a new area in the Power Apps community called Design Matters. And this is an area too where they're going to be talking about best practices for Power Apps design and and how people are designing. I think there's only one item in there right now, but if you have ideas for designs and things like that, and it's things that you can share. I certainly would encourage you to go into the Design Matters area and put that in the chat window as well, and go ahead and submit that for approval for those to be shared with others in the community. And then the last item I have here is that they have the capability now to notify a user when new data is available. So let's say a person is using their Power App throughout the day, and you want to give them the ability to refresh their data so that they can see the most recent information that's coming from SQL or it's coming from a SharePoint list, or wherever that data is stored. This way they can refresh. You can kind of give them a visual indicator that they can update their data. And let me copy this information into our window as well. And so these are some of the tips that I have. Is it a control? No, it's actually a process that you're creating that's built in. If you go to this notifying user of a new data, it will step you through how to repeat that process. So it's not a control that's built in. It's something that you have to build. That you have to build for them. So those are the tips and kind of my best practices. I'd like to open it up to the group and find out if there's others in the group that have utilized a control, different ways, or if they've if anybody has other tips that they'd like to share with people. And everyone should be unmuted, so you should be able to talk, or you can type in the chat window, either way.
I have just a general tip. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just something that it took me a little while to find, but once I did, I use it a lot, and that's the breadcrumb at the bottom. Sometimes I see people kind of searching around to figure out which control they're actually clicked on to, or which one they have selected, but that breadcrumb is really helpful for that.
Whoops, I'm sorry. You're talking about at the bottom where it says like jobs detail page, or it says like jobs detail page text box 4.1.
Right.
That thing. Okay. Let me
Right.
here. I'll show. Let me show Power Apps again, And so what we're looking at is down here at the bottom, it shows you it's kind of like a tree of where you are. You're at jobs detail page, and then text box, you've got text box 4.1 shown. So it's a real easy way to finding it instead of clicking like here and looking at the label. So yeah, that's a great tip.
Right. And sometimes you're in a bunch of different layers, you know, you've got
Exactly.
things on top of each other and stuff, and then you can tell exactly what it's called, the thing that you're on, so you can
Exactly.
reach
Yeah,
out to it.
because that's where, you were Sandy, you were mentioning earlier that, having this list control is great, um, but, it can be, it just depends on personal preference.
Hmm.
But in some ways, like this group, you've got all these different text boxes. And so in this way, you can kind of follow, the tree, how far it goes
Right.
deep. Yeah, great. That's great. Judy and Sudesh, do you have any other tips that you'd like to share? All right, cool. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Sudesh. I appreciate it. And I apologize if I'm messing up your name.
No, you're fine. Sorry, I got to go, but thank you so much.
Yeah,
Talk
thanks
to
for
you
joining
later.
us. Yeah, you
Bye.
bet. Thank you. Judy, anything you'd like to share, add?
No, I'll probably have more questions than offerings. Things like, is there any improvement in, like when you're working with a relational database, lookups and such?
Um, I'm not sure. I haven't seen any, but I probably have to check the blog because I know that that was something that they were working on, especially in the SharePoint list world. But I'm not sure if I haven't seen any changes come out. But that's not to say that they haven't and I just missed it. So,
Are you connected mainly to list?
um, actually, for the most part, I've done a lot with Google Sheets, and so I actually connect to Google Sheets more than I do with List. Um, it's just kind of how with WorkSmart, our company here, our email and everything is based off of Google. So we don't use Outlook. We actually use Google Mail for that hosting, and so we, as a company, we utilize Drive and Google Sheets and Google Docs much more than we do other pieces. So most of the time, our Power Apps are based on those sheets.
Uh,
But it seems like when we do the work that we've done for other clients, we've done a couple of these Power Apps for clients, and those have been based on Google Sheets. Um, we, I, which is a little surprisingly, I thought for sure that we would have one based on SQL Azure, but we have not yet. They've been based on um, SharePoint lists. All right, good. Well, I think what we'll do for next time is talk more about Power BI tile integration with Power Apps because I think they'll kind of be the next logical step for people. So I'll be giving a demonstration on that during our next session.